Josh is a writer, film producer, contributing editor to Wired magazine, and co-founder of Epic magazine. He's an author, of course. He's the author of The Underdog, and he is the author of our book for the One Book, One College series, Spare Parts. Josh's work has been selected Best Technology Writing by Yale University Press 3 times, and he has been anthologized in 2007 and 2012 editions of Best Science Writing. In 2014, he was nominated for the National Magazine Award for Feature Writing. I am so happy that Josh is here to talk about Spare Parts and his life as a writer and a producer and an editor. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome. Joshua Davis.
Thank you, Brock.
Yeah.
Hello, Pasadena. This is great. Amazing. Thank you, guys. Let's see if we can get this on. Let's see here. There we go. Is it working? Well, we are going to talk tonight about spare parts, of course. There's lots to be said. I think you guys heard from Christian and Lorenzo last week. Yeah? Some of you guys were here for that. I'll give you updates on where everybody's at, what they're doing, and the successes and challenges that they've faced. But I think there are some things that didn't get said in the book that I can begin by telling you about, mostly how I came to the story. There's a kind of a little bit more of a backstory there that might explain why I ended up telling it, because they tried to get people interested in the story for quite a while, and nobody responded. I was the first one to respond on the national level. And so I'll maybe explain a little bit about why that was. As Brock just said, I write stories about the most fascinating people in the world, the most interesting experiences that people have had. And basically what I do, the job is I travel around the world and I meet people and then I tell their story. And it has been a really great job for me. It's been fun, it's been adventurous, but the truth is that I didn't study to be a journalist. I studied economics and ended up, strangely, making a series of really bad economic decisions for myself, which resulted in me basically going bankrupt at a young age. So when I kind of was faced with that situation, I got a job as a data entry clerk. And so I was literally typing numbers into a computer for 8 to 10 hours a day. I would try to get overtime, so an extra 2 hours at time and a half. But the job was sitting there typing numbers into a computer. It was for the phone company, Pacific Bell. And I would type these numbers in, and it meant that somebody had checked a box and elected to be in some sort of program. I don't know exactly. I could explain it, but it'd take forever. So I'm just sitting there all day long typing numbers into this computer. And the weird thing is that if I type the number in wrong, the computer beeps at me, which suggests that it already knows the number. And if the computer already knows the number, then what am I doing there, right? And so it started to occur to me that maybe this was a psychological experiment. And they were waiting to see how long it was before I went entirely insane, right? Which I was kind of steadily losing my mind. And so it was around this time that I saw a flyer for the U.S. National Arm Wrestling Championship. Now, I was in maybe a little bit of a vulnerable moment in my life, and I thought, arm wrestling, right? That still exists? Like, I didn't know that there was a competitive world, and, I had seen Sylvester Stallone's Over the Top at some point, but I didn't really know anything about it. But it was on the weekend. It was in Laughlin, Nevada. And I thought, why not, right? I wasn't having a lot of fun at work. It wasn't particularly exciting or challenging. And I thought, why not? Why shouldn't I challenge myself? Why shouldn't I try something different? Fundamentally, nothing was going the way I had planned, so I might as well mix it up a little bit, right? So I drive down to Laughlin, and I was just planning on really observing and seeing what this whole thing was about. And the organizers of the event said, look, it's $20 to enter, and it's open. Anybody who wants can enter the U.S. National Arm Wrestling Championship. And I thought, okay, well, $20 is not a lot of money. I said, the last time I had arm wrestled somebody was my brother when we were 6, and he beat me. So that's my qualification. But they were like, whatever, $20, enter, you'll learn a lot at the least. And so I said, great, okay, I'll do it. But now I was like, okay, well, I've got to go up and arm wrestle these people. And there's like these huge guys. It was pretty intimidating, but they were all very warm and welcoming. I remember there was this one guy, Rick Salawada, who had come from Erie, Pennsylvania. He was a plumber out there, and he had taken a week off work, bought a Greyhound ticket that took him 3 days to get to Laughlin, to wrestle for a day, and then 3 days back to Erie. That's how much he loved arm wrestling. That's how much it meant to him. And he was very warm and welcoming and said, hey, look, here's what you need to know for your matches. It turns out arm wrestling is a pretty straightforward sport. There's only 2 moves, the inside move and the outside move, and we can talk about that later if you want. And so he kind of gave me a primer, and he's like, good luck. Okay, so the competition begins. It's a double elimination event, which means you lose twice and you're out. And guess what? I lost twice. No surprises, and I go to the back of the auditorium at the end, and I'm talking to Rick, and I'm talking to Jeff Tomchason, the current the world champion at the time. And I wasn't paying attention when they begin the award ceremony, and I hear out of the corner of my ear that they're starting with the lightweight division, and they say, okay, starting in fourth place, Joshua Davis, get on up here. Like, what are you talking about? I lost both of my matches. Get on up here. And so I went up on stage, and they put a medal around my neck, and they said, congratulations, you're 4th out of 4. There were only 3 other competitors in the lightweight division. But it turns out that made me an alternate for the U.S. National Arm Wrestling Team. And when numbers 2 and 3 couldn't leave the country because they were on probation, I became part of the U.S. Arm Wrestling Team. That's me. And I went and represented the United States at the World Arm Wrestling Championship in the lightweight division in Gdynia, Poland, of all places. And so suddenly, just by having made that decision, right, to go to Laughlin on a lark and mix it up a little bit and challenge myself and do something that I probably shouldn't have done, I was in Poland arm wrestling, which maybe doesn't sound all that appealing. By the way, it was Poland in the middle of winter, and we were in a town called Sopot. And the big claim to fame of Sopot was it had Poland's longest wooden pier. Right? So not much to say about that town. So I get back, and I bump into somebody in the hallway of my apartment building, and he's a magazine editor, and I was telling him about my experience in Poland, and he says, well, that sounds like a magazine story. I go, well, I don't know anything about that. How do you write an article, or how do you present an article? And he says, very simple. You write up 1 or 2 paragraph summary of your idea, and you email it to an editor, and if they like it, they commission it. They pay you to write it. It's like the lowest barrier to entry. They don't ask, did you study journalism? Do you know how to write? They read if you can write, and if you can, and they believe, that the story is accurate and true, they publish it, and they have fact checkers that check it. And so I ended up sending a 1 to 2, I think it was a 2-paragraph summary of my experience in Poland to, of all places, Maxim. And Maxim ended up running the article about this experience. And so suddenly I was a journalist. and this was back in 2002, 2003. You know, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was obviously keeping track, as most of us were, of the run-up to the war in Iraq at that point. And I went to Wired magazine and said, hey, I know you guys are probably planning you know, really intensive coverage of the war, but maybe I could write a side story on whatever else your other writers are doing. And they said, we don't have anybody covering the war. I said, well, send me. Well, what are your qualifications? And I said, you know, to be a war correspondent. I said, well, I'm 4th place in the United States with my right arm, and and by the way, I didn't even tell you, I was 17th in the world. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, 17th out of 18. Don't clap. Yeah. And the 18th guy didn't show up, so I've actually never won a match in my life. But you know, I didn't go into all that with Wired. I was 17th in the world. Let me know if it's for me. So I don't think they really had anybody else. So they ended up sending me to the war. And I became a war correspondent and have subsequently gone on to cover both Iraq and Libya, uprising in southern Colombia, and found myself to be a journalist, you know. And it traces back to that decision when I was typing numbers into a computer to go to Laughlin. One of the things that happens when you become a journalist is you start getting press releases. This is like one of the downsides of it. And I think, as many of you know from the book, I got a press release from the students of Carl Hayden Community High School. And I get a ton of these all the time, every day, and I just press delete, 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 delete. They're usually about a cell phone that's going to change your life, and they're garbage. But this one that I got just over 10 years ago, it was in October of 2004, was from Carl Hayden. I'd never heard of them. And it was gobbledygook. It was like one of those emails that you sometimes get where it's the entire email is on one line, right? And you have to like scroll over to read it. You know, that's what it was like. What is this? And then there would be like a line break, and there'd be one word, and then an exclamation mark, and then brackets, and it was just, you couldn't understand what they were trying to say. But there was something about it that didn't make me delete it, but I didn't call them or do anything about it. I sat on it for maybe a month, I think, until November. And finally, I was like, what was that weird press release? And I read it, and I called Freddie, the number that was there. I called Freddie Lajvardi, the teacher. And he's like, oh, my God, a journalist. I was like, yeah. I was like, not surprising that nobody's called you given your press release. We can talk about how to write press releases, but you've got to learn a little bit about that. But in fact, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the weirdness of it is what attracted me to it. Either way, it worked, because I was on the phone with him, and he explained that it wasn't the case that they didn't get a lot of press attention. Again, some of this will be familiar to you from the beginning of the book. Freddie said that recently there had been a fight at Carl Hayden. And so the local news had sent a camera crew out to talk about that. And the guy set up his camera and was like, here we are at Carl Hayden. And you could almost tell from the tone of his voice what he's not saying is again, right? Here we are at Carl Hayden again, and there's another fight again, right? And Freddie was upset about that, and the students were upset about that because they had started to build robots, and they felt that what they were doing was exciting and impressive and worthy of being talked about, at least as worthy as the fight, right? And so they decided to drive the robot out to the news camera and start driving circles around him. Right? Like, hey, pay attention. And the guy didn't pay any attention. And so finally they drove the robot into his foot. And the guy was like, okay, what is this? And they explained, And the guy, and Freddie is relating this to me on the phone, and he quoted what the journalist, the local journalist had said to him was, "That's not the story I was sent here to tell." Right? And when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, it certainly sounds like there's something else going on there. And if nobody's telling that, what was going through my mind was, wait a second, if you're not telling the full story about what's happening in a neighborhood or in a city, then people are going to start to form impressions, or they're going to go with whatever they're hearing, and if those impressions or those stories reinforce their preconceptions, then they're not really going to know what's happening there, and they're going to make bad decisions about, when it comes to voting or when it comes to meeting somebody on the street, right? And so I said, okay, I'll come out. I'll fly out there, and you can show me whatever it is you're doing. And so I flew out there in January of 2005. For the first time, and this is what I saw. The ugliest robot you could imagine. I was like, oh no, I made a mistake. This is not going to go well. Like, this thing, this is what they built? It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's got a tape measure on it, and it's got a pipe fitting, and it's got this weird briefcase on the top, and I was very doubtful that this was going to be a story that was really going to go anywhere. But then I met Oscar, and I met Lorenzo and Luis and Christian, who you all know now, and they started to explain Stinky to me. And as they explained it, I started to see it through their eyes, which is very different than those of us who see it for the first time and don't have an engineering background who don't get it. But what Christian explained was that this tape measure was actually the best solution to the problem that they were facing. Everybody else was trying to figure out how to do lasers underwater and all these crazy ideas. They came up with a solution that cost $1.99, which was just a tape measure, and then back it up with a camera pointed down, and then you can see the distance. And it's like, why does it need to be more complicated? And I was like, well, yeah, you're right. It doesn't need to be more complicated. The other thing that really captured my attention about this team and Carl Hayden was the teachers, or were the teachers, Alan, Cameron, and Freddie Lajvardi. Carl Hayden is a school that has roughly 80% free and reduced lunch, so the population is roughly 80% at or below the poverty line. And the population that is in ESL is probably similar, 80 to 90%. So there's a very significant Latino population. It's a student population that's coming to Carl Hayden oftentimes with math and English scores that are below the grade level. And so the typical response in the education community to that scenario is, okay, let's focus on the basics, right? Let's start on the building blocks, which, makes sense. Alan and Freddie said, nope, that doesn't make sense. Nope, that's not what we're going to do. What they said is, who gets excited about rudimentary math? Right? Probably not, right? It's important, but you don't necessarily get excited about it. What you get excited about is the challenge that makes you want to do the rudimentary math so that you can do the advanced math to accomplish the extraordinary challenge. And so Alan and Freddie said to the students, we're not going to focus on the basics. We're going to enter you, or we're going to encourage you, really, it was the guy's decision, to enter a contest sponsored by NASA and the US Navy, and you're going to go up against some of the best colleges in the country. And you live in the middle of a desert, you don't even have a swimming pool. Right? Outlandish. And I think one of the things that attracted me to the story on maybe even a subconscious level was that these guys made this decision to challenge themselves. They made a decision to put themselves outside of their comfort zone and do something that most people probably thought they shouldn't have done, right? And that was a little bit resonant to me about similar to my decision to arm wrestle in a different way. But I could see that when I went to Laughlin, it changed my life in many ways. And this decision of theirs to get outside their comfort zone and go to Santa Barbara also had a crazy ripple effect on their life. So here they were. This is the day before they left for Santa Barbara. In the book, you'll see it as a small picture. This was back when, like, digital cameras, I think like a high-res image was 50K. So this was the best they had. You guys remember in the book this decision, as you know, they had very limited resources to work with, and obviously the teams they were going up with had, an extraordinary amount of resources. You'll see here, they have this milk jug. They literally pulled a milk jug out of the garbage can and sawed it in half and used that as part of their effort to draw a sample of water from underwater, which is pretty complex. And they're using garbage, literally garbage, to accomplish this mission. When they go to Santa Barbara, they see the MIT robot, which looks like a piece, as Alan said, of underwater jewelry. The team is sponsored by ExxonMobil at the time, the world's largest corporation. Exxon has given the MIT team $10,000 to build their robot. The guys from Carl Hayden have like maybe $800 and a bunch of garbage. But MIT was not able to complete the task of pulling the water out from the underwater watering sample. And guess who did? Carl Hayden completed that task, right? And when they were tasked with measuring the distance of the submarine, they were able to latch their pipe fitting on one end of the pretend submarine and back up. In the end, they weren't able to get the completely accurate reading, but it worked better than many teams whose robots just completely went kaput. And so underneath it, you have a robot that looks maybe not as sophisticated as, in fact, it really is. This is the brains of the robot. So when I wrote this story, I hoped in a way that it would maybe balance out what some of the messages were that were being told about Carl Hayden and about West Phoenix. Arizona is a very charged political environment, particularly when it comes to immigration. It's an environment where these students, Christian and Oscar and Luis and Lorenzo, their decision to go to Santa Barbara makes my decision to go to Laughlin look like child's play, right? I want you guys to think about what went into that decision for them. The only one at that time who had papers was Luis. Oscar and Christian and Lorenzo were undocumented. So their decision to go compete in Santa Barbara wasn't just a decision to go to a science contest and maybe be embarrassed if they did poorly, right? If they ran into a checkpoint on the way or on the way back, which in fact they did, they ran the risk of having their entire life torn apart. And so how many things do you have that you would make that decision for? Can you think of something that you would say, I am so passionate about this, and this is so important and meaningful to me, that I would risk having my life torn asunder? These guys made that decision. They cared enough about competing and about showing what they could do that they got in the van and went out there. And the result, as you know, luckily they did not get harassed any further at that checkpoint. But they did something that I think has brought us all together, right? Their decision to do that didn't just impact them. It didn't just impact me. It is something now that has had a ripple effect, right? And I cite that just as something for you guys to think about. When you make a decision to challenge yourself, when you do something that is unusual for you and a challenge for you, it can have an unusual impact in many ways. So the story that I ended up writing about them came out in, I believe it was May of 2005. This is them right after they won the competition. And I thought that, you know, they win this competition, and you would think that it would prove that they were amongst the best underwater engineers in the country, right? They beat MIT to win the National Underwater Robotics Championship. But the challenge wasn't over. Right after this competition, about 4 months after they got back, Arizona voters passed Proposition 200, which barred immigrants, undocumented immigrants from healthcare, education. After I wrote the article, I thought that might change the political dynamic maybe a little bit, giving it some attention. ABC News in 2020 covered it. About 6 months after, no, I'm sorry, about 12 months after the article, Arizona voters passed Prop 300, which only further ratcheted up the restrictions on undocumented students. So that's a little bit, it gives you pause, right? I thought, hey, I was going to try to shine a light on this and it might help the dialogue. And in many ways, it seemed like the dialogue was going in a different direction. The students also, as you know, Christian and Oscar were at ASU, and this proposition directly impacted them. It ended up driving Christian out of college at the time. He didn't have enough money to complete his education, and it took him the better part of 10 years to get back into college. But I think one thing that you can see from this, like they were 18 years old, they were 19 years old, they're roughly your age, 20 years old. They never stopped fighting. Like none of them have ever given up. It took Christian 10 years to get back in college, but he's back in college now. As you heard, he's at Western Michigan. So one of the things that came from the original article, I don't know if any of you probably didn't see this. I don't think it was in the book. This is the original article, and the title of it was La Vida Robot. Lionsgate changed the title to Spare Parts because they didn't feel people would understand the Spanish. I'm like, it's not that complicated. The book and this is the hardcover and the soft cover and the movie has ended up having this very interesting impact. Whereas it hasn't changed the political climate entirely in Arizona, I think it has impacted the political climate nationally. So you'll see, for instance, Senator Dick Durbin carrying a poster photo of Oscar onto the floor of the U.S. Senate and saying, "This is the face of America," right? How this young man who built a robot ended up on the floor of the Senate as a symbol for for an entire generation, I think did have an impact and led to President Obama passing DACA, or creating DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which prevents the deportation of students who are in school and, you know, a number of things, but it basically safeguards up roughly 2 million students in America. So I don't want you to think that it's a rosy story entirely, and I don't want you to think that it's a sad story entirely. I want you to think it it's a real story, right? It's never as easy as you think it's going or hope it's going to be, and sometimes it's a lot harder, but the fundamental through line for each of these guys, both in Underwater Dreams, as you've seen, and more recently, is that they never gave up. You know, none of them did. So the things I think that have resonated for me and have been important for me is this decision that they made to challenge themselves in a way that other people probably thought was crazy. I think many of you have an opportunity to do that. I don't know what it is. Only you will really know what that challenge might be. Maybe it's arm wrestling. I don't know. I think also knowing that when you make that decision, maybe you have to keep changing, maybe you have to keep adapting, but ultimately, you can't give up. You got to keep fighting. So I'm happy to talk about anything that's of interest to you. I think there's a microphone here and a microphone there, and we can get into questions. I can give you more of an update about everybody, but thank you, guys. We can talk about journalism, we can talk about spare parts, we can talk about movie making, whatever is of interest to you. Looks like we have a question here.
So, I would like to know the process in which you took to familiarize yourself with the people in the book. How did you get to know each character, and what was your first impression when you met them?
So I first met them in January of '05, and I went on to spend the better part of 10 years talking to them, probably, you know, at least every other month, and keeping tabs on them, keeping tabs on the teachers. I went out to Phoenix probably once a year, or they came to California. So I saw them in a variety of circumstances, and you know, I met them when they were in high school, basically, and watched them grow over a 10-year period, and was there at critical moments. So, for instance, when Oscar self-deported and went to Juarez, we all thought that he was going to come back very quickly, and then he ended up getting, as you know, banned from the United States for 10 years. And that was very upsetting to me. Particularly, he just graduated from ASU with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he gets banned from the United States for 10 years? How does that make any sense? And so I did what I could I wrote a letter to immigration and tried to get as many people as I knew to write letters to immigration about it. And then when that was, after a year, was finally overturned in large part because of Senator Dick Durbin, he had a homecoming back in Phoenix, and I went out for that. So basically, they became part of my life. And my first impressions of them, Christian was very skinny. Lorenzo had the weirdest haircut you've ever seen. People in school called it the Mexican mullet. It was this weird thing. I couldn't make sense of it. And Luis, you know, he didn't say anything. Very hard to get a word out of him. I just saw him on Saturday, actually. I was in Phoenix on Saturday with him. And now he's actually quite talkative. Well, more talkative anyway. And Oscar, it was like he looked like the Marine, right? He had just gotten out of ROTC, and ROTC wasn't going to work out for him. But he still had that. He still has that bearing of a soldier that, you know, he ended up becoming one. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your shoes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so after reading the book, I had realized that a lot of how you planned the book, it looks a lot like how you would see in a Hollywood movie. Did you have that in mind?
Part of the reason why I wanted to write the book is the process of making the movie was actually quite long and difficult. It was originally, this is a slightly long answer to your question, but I'll get there. Originally, Warner Brothers optioned the article, and this great producer named John Wells, who made the TV show ER and the West Wing, was producing it. And the script that they brought in ended up not pleasing the studio, and so that was 3 years that went nowhere. Then Salma Hayek took it over to MGM and tried to develop there, but never worked out. And finally, you know, another 3 years go by, so now we're like 9 years of time, and it finally lands at Lionsgate. And I read the script, and I liked it, but at the same time, I realized that the movie was going to end in 2004, right? And that's not the full story. And part of my desire to write the book was I felt it was important to talk about what happened after the competition. So, you know, I think that the book is roughly like 2/3 leading up to the competition and 1/3 after. That's part of the reason why I wrote it. To your question about how I wrote it and the style of writing it, I tend, if you read my other work, I tend to write in a visual way because I want people to feel like they're there. I want them to feel like they're in a room with these people. And some people call that cinematic journalism. Some people call it, you know, new journalism is now quite an old term, but you know, it's a style of journalism that attempts to bring you into a world.
Okay, feels like I had this question only because the way I read it was that, you know, as you said, it's like it's extremely cinematic. As in every chapter, you know, as I see it, it looks like I would see it in a movie, and I was wondering if it was really, you know, intentional. I
think there is a. I think it's certainly intentional to tell a visual story. Mm-hmm. You know, and to the extent that I can get in, help you understand what's happening inside somebody's head and go inside their internal world, then I'll also do that. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, as a writer, you have a tool chest, and you try to use as many tools as are appropriate to a story.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to create a book about these four boys on the actions?
Can you say that again?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to create a book about these four boys on the actions of what they went through as a group and as a team?
Why did I want to write the book? Why did I create the book?
Yes.
Well, one of the reasons is, you know, I'd already written the article, so I had told part of the story. The film is another reason I felt like the film was going to be in some way incomplete. But also, I think that, you know, the fundamental story of what these guys did was inspiring to me. It made me want to try to be a better person. It made me want to try to challenge myself. And that's, I feel, as a journalist, something that's worth telling. So that's fundamentally, it was a decision based on the idea that I felt like this might also inspire other people. If it inspired me, it might inspire other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering, like, what you're gonna do next, just like in lieu of everything that's happening politically in our world right now. Are you working on something, or is something interesting to you?
You know, it's interesting because I don't set out to be a political writer in one way or the other. I look to tell people's stories. I want to tell somebody's experience, mm-hmm. And yet because of this, I get a lot of emails now from people who have amazing stories within the Latino community. So in some ways, I've become somebody who's like a Latino journalist, even though I'm not Latino at all. Yeah. And it's one of my biggest regrets that I didn't study Spanish. It's ridiculous, you know. I've spent more time in Spanish-speaking countries reporting than I have. I studied French for some stupid reason. It's like all my educational decisions, economics and French, they all backfired. So I've been in France reporting, and that's useful because I can order a croissant, right? But I've spent, I would say, you know, months and months at this point in Spanish-speaking countries, and I struggle with the language. So your question, remind me.
Just like, is anything?
Oh yeah, what's that? Oh yeah, so this is where I was headed with that. So after this, I ended up getting an email from Marcos Garcia Costa, who was a supporter of the Carl Hayden team. And he said, hey, have you heard about this story of this young lady in Matamoros? I don't know if you know where that is. It's across from Brownsville in Texas. And it turns out that the smartest math student in Mexico is an 11-year-old girl who lives in a garbage dump on the border. Wow. And I flew down there to Matamoros and met her and tried to understand how this came to be. And it wasn't just her. There was a group of students that had been mentored by this one particularly innovative teacher. And I wrote the story about that, and I'll show you here, actually. It's over here. We put her on the cover. We'll zoom backwards here. She's, there she is, the next Steve Jobs. So that's a story that doesn't touch on immigration as much as it touches on the future of education and how we learn. And so I have certainly spent a lot of time thinking about that. Now I run a magazine called Epic, and we focus on those kind of big, dramatic stories that feel rich and important to us. I don't know how many of you saw the film Argo, but that was one of our projects. And so now we produce films at 20th Century Fox, and we produce TV shows at A&E, and we try to bring these stories to as broad an audience as we can bring them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello. So in the book, you have a lot of really specific conversations and information. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even like the real estate agent who took control of Lorenzo's house.
What's his name? Scott something? Hirschberg? Scott something? Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
So was it hard to track these people down or to get like direct quotes?
That's a good question. So part of it was like, I'm very thankful that I was there in January of 2005, so everything was still very fresh in their mind. So I would sit down with them and then I would say, okay, you opened the briefcase and there was a wire that had, fallen out and you needed to solder it back. What did you say? And, if you ask the guys how they feel about me, they might not be so happy because I badger them.
Oh.
I say, no. What did you say at this exact moment? And then I would ask everybody else, is that what he said? And then I would basically make them all kind of work together to remember the moments of what happened. And then in terms of tracking people down, Lorenzo remembered the guy's name, the realtor, and I just Googled him, and then I called his office. And he's like, oh, yeah, I remember Lorenzo.
He remembered dousing himself with alcohol?
Yeah. Oh, he told me that whole story. Yeah. Because he said the house was so disgusting, he had to, when he got out, he had to douse himself in gasoline or something. I don't know what it was.
He was rubbing alcohol.
Rubbing alcohol, yeah. So that story and Spare Parts, tracking the people down was not hard. There are many other stories. I did this story about an Italian art thief who had stolen a very famous painting, and that took a lot more to try to track that guy down. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And nice watch.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. It's my tomato watch in case you guys throw tomatoes at me. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. I'm curious, on the other side, did you talk to the people at MIT at any point who were part of the competition?
Yeah, so I spoke to MIT back in '05. They were a little bit hesitant to talk to me. I think in part because they were embarrassed. They got beat, you know. And I think that I never heard directly from them after I wrote that original article, but I think what I did hear through other channels was that they were upset with the article because it made them out to be the villains, almost, right? I don't feel that that's accurate. They were certainly the big, like, the looming threat, right? Like, if you're a high school team and you're going up against the best engineering team, you're going to feel that way about them, that they are not mean. I certainly never made them out to be mean, but just, you know, the big, the opponent you never think, the Goliath you don't think you can slay. But nonetheless, they were not happy with that portrayal and didn't cooperate back, you know, going forward over the years. They didn't want to talk to me. One of their mentors did talk to me and was very welcoming over the years, but the students themselves no longer did. They did, however, cooperate with Underwater Dreams, and they had that big reunion scene, which was fascinating, because those guys have gone on to do great things, you know, by basically the things that Christian Lorenzo and Luis and Oscar wanted to do. One of them designed the earbuds for the iPhone, right? 2 or 3 of the other ones are working in underwater ROVs. And as you know, the Carl Hayden guys faced great challenges and certainly are not working for Apple. So it's a good question. You know, having seen the Underwater Dreams reunion scene, I think you'll get a sense for their feelings are still there of support. And I will point out that when Carl Hayden won the 2004 competition, everybody stood up and applauded them, including MIT.
Thank you.
Hi. So, being a technology writer, what do you think of Elon Musk? I mean, the guy's my hero.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think he's amazing. I first met him in 2005, probably. I wrote the first article about Tesla in a national magazine, and so I drove the model. It was the Roadster at that time, and the CEO of the company was not Elon at that point. He was just the primary investor, and I was certainly fascinated by him, and we stayed in touch over the years. I remember I had dinner with him probably in '06. I think it was '06, and it was here in LA, down by LAX, and he had 3 like hospital bracelets on his arm, and so I said, "Is everything okay? You know, if you have hospital bracelets, you know, something's up." And he goes, "Oh no, it's nothing. It's fine. My wife just had triplets last night." So he's an unusual person. I have an immense respect for what he's done. I mean, he's running 2 extraordinary companies right now, and that takes a toll on your personal life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions, if you don't mind. The first question is like, why you kept bouncing in your article? Like, you're talking about something, and then you kept going back and forth.
Right.
So like,
why do that?
Yeah. And the second question is like,
I'll repeat the question.
How did the guys got their citizenship, other than
yeah.
Oscar?
Yeah, I'll explain that. So the first question is, why do I toggle back and forth between 2 narratives in a story? Is that correct? That's the right. I guess it's just more interesting. I hope you feel that way. I hope it's a more interesting way of storytelling. It's also like, if you just tell one story chronologically, to the end and then back up and tell the other story chronologically to the end, you're missing what's happening to both sides of the story at the same time, right? So it helps if you tell a little bit of the story and move forward in time a little bit, and then tell something else that's happening at the same time and move forward a little bit. And that way you get the sense that they're happening simultaneously. And it gives you a greater feeling of context than you would get if you just told one story straight and then the other story straight. So that's the answer to that. And then the second question is, how did they get their citizenship? The answer is they haven't. So Lorenzo and Luis do not, I'm sorry. Luis got his citizenship, or got his green card right after he graduated in 2004. And then Christian does not have citizenship. He and nor does Lorenzo. The two of them are protected currently by DACA, which is a executive order, a presidential executive order, which means it's not an act of Congress. The president just signed something that says this is what's going to happen. So whoever the next president is, depending on who they are, can overturn it with a simple signature. In which case, Christian and Lorenzo would face deportation. Certainly, if Trump gets elected, then a lot of people are in trouble. God willing, that won't happen. And then Oscar, you know how he got his citizenship. He crazy trials and tribulations, but ended up enlisting in the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. I just had a question. So, in your opinion, as a journalist, what do you think is the hardest part about keeping the stories you write about people or in general as authentic and true as possible?
I think it's important to spend a lot of time with people. You know, this kind of reporting is time-consuming. You know, the book took 10 years. The articles that I write, I've written a number of articles that took me 7 years, 8 years. You have to spend the time, and that's, there's a whole separate conversation about how do you support yourself when you're doing that. You know, that's a difficult task, and it's a very challenging environment now for journalism. But suffice to say that you have to invest. You have to invest both your time and emotionally to understand people. And then, in terms of accuracy, there's a whole set of tools that journalists have to try to, fact check and get at the truth and get primary source documents that may call into question what somebody told you, depending on the story.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. So, why do you think why didn't you think the Carl Hayden story got picked up? Was it because of the formatting of the email?
Why did I pick it up?
Why do you think that other people didn't pick it up?
Did not pick it up. Yeah, that's a good question. The question is, why didn't anybody else respond to that press release? Last year, for the film premiere, Lionsgate premiered the movie in Phoenix, and I was there for that, and I met, there were a bunch of journalists from the Phoenix area who were covering it, and one of them is this great reporter named Richard Rulis. And Richard had also gotten that press release. And he explained to me that he said, I got that press release and I did nothing about it. And he basically said that that was a mistake that he made. He then went on to make up for that by embedding in the Carl Hayden robotics team and doing a year-long story about the work that they were doing in the Arizona. He wrote it for the Arizona Republic. So he's gone on to do some really great journalism around the team. I think part of it was that the press release was hard to read. Some people may not have believed it because it sounded so crazy. But I don't know. It's like they sent it out to, I think he said, over 300 people. And I was the only one to respond. And maybe the other way of looking at it is, maybe it's not surprising that nobody responded. Maybe it's more surprising that I did respond, and it may well have to do with the arm wrestling. You know, just a quirk of fate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. Good
Hi.
evening. So I have a question for you. So in the book, there are mention of how the media have a power to manipulate how the society view on certain topics, such as thugs, violence in high school, instead of their teens' great achievement in robotic competition. So do you think it is a problem we need to solve? Or if the answer is yes, what is the best solution you think it is?
The solution to what exactly?
Like to change the fact that the media tend to focus on the certain topic instead of like the good thing, like the thing that you did.
Yeah, you know, that's the billion-dollar question, I guess. How do you change culture? You know, how do you get people to be more open-minded? How do you get people to put aside their assumptions about other people and meet them on their own terms? I don't have a big answer to that question. The answer that I have is the small answer, which is you tell people stories and you introduce people for who they are and what they're interested in, and you try to connect with them based on that. And hopefully, if enough of us do that, the culture does change. And I think we are seeing that over the course of decades that things have changed in some ways, but it's a slow-moving train and to turn. I don't know what the right analogy is. So,
thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
When I read the book, something came to mind about the competition. And what came to mind was, after they won, did the judges ever explain to those boys exactly why their rover won the competition?
They did not. I have since spoken to the judges who said, the scoring, they did not win the pool portion, the actual mission portion. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think they came in third in that. And then there was the technical paper, and then there was the oral examination. So they knew they were coming in at third just on hard facts, right? Like you can't deny that they did what they did. Then the technical paper, they were completely amazed that they won the technical writing award. But the judges explained that everybody else was using all this highfalutin language to explain something, and these guys just said, this is what it is and this is what it does, right? And the judges found that refreshing. And then the judges told me that during the oral examination, they all knew exactly what they were talking about. And the guys had been drilling, both on the drive there and for months in advance, so that they were experts in all of these things.
Now, did their idea of making that rover ever become a part of NASA or like the Navy, as in, they kind of had an idea of how to create a rover based on just garbage?
You mean at the outset?
Yeah, like...
No, they had almost no idea. They had received the mission description, so they knew what it had to do. And they were just kind of winging it, really, They had the limited budget that they had, and therefore they said, well, the only thing we could really afford is PVC pipe. And then using that as the basis, they just kind of built on and tried to come up with solutions as best they could. So it wasn't at all, they had almost no background.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. I do not have a question. I want to say only thank you so much for sharing the history. It makes me happy because I'm an immigrant, and now I know I'm in the right path. I'm in college, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah.
My name is Leo. So after I read your book, I'm just wondering if you ever went back to Carl Hayden to visit the new robotic teams?
Yeah, I go there frequently. I was there in January. I was in Phoenix last weekend, but I didn't go to Carl Hayden because it was the weekend. I've been there to Carl Hayden at least once this year. And, you know, it's interesting, I talk about this in the book, that some people might have thought that the victory in 2004 was a fluke, right? That, well, okay, you know, maybe these guys are geniuses, and that's it. But they beat MIT the next year, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a fluke. And not only that, but the team, even after the guys graduated, the legacy that they built at Carl Hayden has gone on to inspire that entire school and every new class of students that comes in, such that Carl Hayden has become a robotics powerhouse, both in Phoenix and in Arizona and nationally. They went on to win the Chairman's Award in FIRST Robotics, which is one of the preeminent robotics competitions in the country, and they won the highest level award. And at that point, none of those original students were on the team. So the legacy that they have left is something that is very exciting for me to see when I go there. There's a Hall of Fame or a Wall of Fame that has the names of some of the most accomplished robotics students to graduate from Carl Hayden. And at the very top of the list are Christian, Lorenzo, Luis, and Oscar.
Okay, are you going to write more books about like robotics?
If you have a good idea for one, let me know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question was, why didn't you give the different chapters names? Why did you just leave it blank?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't feel like it needed it, I guess. I felt like it would be a little too heavy-handed to try to say, okay, this is what you need to be thinking about as you go into this chapter. I felt like the story would just flow more smoothly without me interjecting something like that.
And my other question was, how much did you know about immigration or its policies prior to meeting them?
Almost nothing. Almost nothing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I feel like I'm getting my exercise tonight.
Okay, at the end of the book, you mentioned that the four boys ended up doing something. One of them was tinkering, one became a cook. And I know that you keep up with all four of them. I'm just curious to know, what do they do now?
So Christian, who was here, I think 2 weeks ago, is finally back in college. He's at Western Michigan studying engineering. Somebody who read the book offered to help him with tuition. And so he was able to get back in school, which is great. Oscar works for BNSF, is that right? Yeah, BNSF, the train company. And he's based in Montana. He's a mechanical engineer for the train company. He's married to Carla and has 2 children. Lorenzo was working at a restaurant called St. Francis, which was a fancy restaurant in Phoenix. He has left St. Francis to start a catering company with Luis called Neither Here Nor There. And so they're right now in the process of just trying to put that together. They do a job, they make a certain amount of profit, and then they use that profit to buy more equipment and grow the business, and so they're in that stage of building their business. While Luis works nights, he works, I think, from 9 o'clock till 3 in the morning, supervising a janitorial team at the federal courthouses in downtown Phoenix. And also Freddie and Alan, it's funny, in the movie, Spare Parts, they got combined into one character, which they took the first, they named the character Freddie Cameron. So they took the two names and combined them. And the joke on the set was, what do you get? So Freddie is of Iranian descent, and Alan is of Scottish descent. So the joke on the set of the film was, what do you get when you cross a Iranian with a Scotsman? You get George Lopez. So that was Freddie Cameron. And so those guys, Alan is retired and spends a lot of time biking all over the United States. And Freddie still runs the program at Carl Hayden and teaches science, marine science, and runs the robotics program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
I want to ask, do you have your own family? And if you do, how do you balance your
That's a good question.
And
I do. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it's changed a bunch of things for me. I was in Libya in 2012, and I was there right before the attack on the consulate in Benghazi, and it was a very tumultuous, dangerous place, and there was some things happened there that I was not at all comfortable with, and I came back and decided that I can't do that kind of reporting anymore. So I try to stay away from war zones.
But like, how about the time that you spend?
The time, right? So the question is, how does my time? My wife is not happy with my schedule. Sometimes she's okay with it, and then there are periods of time. This week was not a good week. I came here this morning, and I go back tomorrow, but on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, I had dinner meetings, basically, and that was not a good thing. So she let me know that.
Do you get to see them often?
What's that?
Do you get to see them often or no?
Yeah, what I'm doing now, at least with my kids, is I try to, if I'm on a reporting trip, I'll try to take them with me. So I took you remember that story about the Italian thief in Venice? So I took her to go find the thief with me. So that was really fun. Okay. And I took my boy to see Oscar up in Alaska earlier, back in 2014. So it's hard. Look, it's not easy, particularly if you really, have a passion to tell stories, and the stories are all over the world. Then that is a hard thing to juggle.
And did you say you're friends with Selma Hayek?
Well, she took over the spare parts project when we were working on it at Warner Brothers, and so she took it to MGM. So my dealings were just professional.
Okay.
So while reading this book, I did some research on you as an author, and you seem to have accomplished so much. And hearing you talk about it tonight, you've been so many places, and you've spent a lot of time with people, and now you have 2 kids. You look very young. So if I may, how old are you?
I just turned in October 41.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know how old I look, but maybe younger than 41. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, now that you've outed me on my age, I'm going to be somewhere around here if anybody wants me to sign a book.
Thank you. Thank you to those of you who stayed till the bitter end. Thank you.